Welcome to this explainer. Look, we're right in the middle of a massive transformation. But today, we're zooming in on the hidden chain reaction happening right behind the scenes. We all see the boom in electric vehicles out on the roads, right? But what we generally don't see is the severe, almost invisible strain this is putting on our actual physical power grid. So we're going to trace this thread, from the cars to the chargers, all the way down to the nuts and bolts of our electrical infrastructure.
Okay, let's dive into this with a quick trivia question to set the stage. If I asked you which US state has the absolute most EV chargers per electric vehicle, what would you guess? I mean, most of us would immediately picture California, right? It's kind of the undisputed capital of the American EV movement.
But no way! The actual answer is Wyoming. They boast a really impressive 22.2 chargers for every 100 EVs. Now, to be totally fair, they only have about 1,500 registered electric vehicles in the entire state, which are served by 333 ports. But still, it completely subverts our expectations right out of the gate, and it just shows how wildly diverse the infrastructure rollout really is across the country.
Section 1. The electric vehicle boom.
We're experiencing this monumental shift in how Americans drive. The U.S. EV population recently surged 26.7%. That's a jump from 3.56 million to over 4.5 million vehicles. Think about that. That is a staggering influx of rolling batteries that all eventually need to plug into the grid. And to support this shift, the charging infrastructure is literally fighting to keep pace. For the first time, public ports have risen 34.6%, jumping to over 242,000 across nearly 80,000 stations nationwide. It's this massive, real-time construction effort. Now, while Wyoming might win the per capita ratio, California absolutely dominates the raw numbers. They're home to 26% of all U.S. EV ports. And they're really pushing the boundaries of what a charging station even looks like. Take rural super sites like Project Oasis in Lost Hills, for example. They are packing a massive 164 chargers into a single location.
Section 2. Charging the future.
Which brings us to the technological race to scale all of this charging infrastructure. It's not just about building more plugs, it's about building the right kind of plugs for everyday consumers and, increasingly, for massive commercial autonomous fleets. When you look at the players, it's definitely a mixed bag. ChargePoint currently has the largest network in the US, but only about 6% of their stations are DC fast chargers. Most of them are the slower level 2 chargers. On the flip side, competitors like EVgo and Tesla are heavily prioritizing DC fast chargers. Those are the ones capable of giving you 150 miles of range in just a few minutes. Because, let's face it, if we want EVs to match the convenience of gas-powered cars, that fast charging capability is absolutely non-negotiable. But what happens when you remove the human driver entirely? Picture companies operating fleets of thousands of robo-taxis, having actual humans run around plugging them in all day. That's a massive operational bottleneck. That is exactly where a company named Roxys comes in. They just raised a $13 million Series A extension specifically for their M1 charger. It's this overhead, rail-mounted robotic arm that autonomously plugs in vehicles. Just one robot can slide along and serve 10 different bays with 99.9% reliability. So this isn't just about cool tech, it's about incredible efficiency. We're talking about saving a 50-bay depot up to $1.7 million a year in labor alone. A real game changer. So the crucial point is we have the cars and we're actively building these high-tech chargers and robots to power them. But can the underlying, completely invisible US power grid actually handle this explosion in charging? We are talking about adding unprecedented loads to systems that, in a lot of cases, have been operating the exact same way for decades. Section 3. The hidden grid bottleneck.
This brings us to the most critical failure point of this entire electrification chain reaction. It's the unsung hero of our modern world, the distribution transformer. You know, you've seen these. They're the metal cylinders sitting up on telephone poles or those green metal boxes in your neighborhood. Their job is to step down medium-level voltage from power lines so it's actually safe for us to use. Right now, the U.S. relies on a stock of 60 to 80 million of these distribution transformers, representing over 3 terawatts of capacity. That's enough to power the entire country multiple times over. But right now, they are experiencing a completely unprecedented supply and demand imbalance.
Now, what's really interesting here is the number 2. 2 is the critical number in this crisis. Utilities are currently facing 2-year lead times just to get new transformers. That is a 4-fold increase from what it took before 2022. And because of this massive, massive backlog, prices have spiked anywhere from 4 to 9 times higher than normal. So, what exactly is driving this huge shortage? Well, first, there's the aggressive push for electrification. As we plug in more EVs, heat pumps, and data centers, we're going to need a 160% to 260% capacity increase by the year 2050. Next, you have the physical age of the system. The vast majority of our existing stock is aging pretty rapidly, with many transformers sitting out there on the grid for 30 to over 40 years, well beyond their designed lifespan. And finally, extreme weather adds this totally chaotic element. When hurricanes, wildfires, or intense heat waves hit, they can instantly wipe out thousands of transformers, forcing immediate replacements and just heavily draining an already constrained supply chain. Because of these constant, really severe weather threats, the physical design of the grid is actually changing in real time. Utilities are actively shifting demand away from those highly vulnerable traditional pole-mounted transformers. To mitigate the urgent risks from wildfires and storms, they're spending billions to aggressively move power lines underground. And naturally, that creates a massive, sudden spike in demand for pad-mounted and submersible transformers. Let's move to Section 4, Tech and Policy Solutions, and see how this builds. Fixing a supply chain issue this massive obviously requires major moves from both the federal government and the private sector. On the federal level, President Trump recently issued executive memoranda invoking the Defense Production Act, or DPA, to boost transformer and grid equipment manufacturing. Basically, this act grants the government authority to make purchase commitments and offer subsidies to bolster domestic supply chains. However, as policy experts have noted, there's a stark financial reality to keep in mind here. Only about $323 million remains in the fiscal year 2026 DPA fund, so this limited budget may severely restrict the immediate financial impact of these sweeping directives unless there are further congressional appropriations. At the exact same time, we're seeing a really complex dynamic between federal priorities and state-level infrastructure rollouts. While the administration's DPA directives focus heavily on broad grid infrastructure and domestic fossil fuel production, 16 states have actually filed lawsuits against the federal government. These states are suing over the withholding of National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure, or NEVI, program funding. It really highlights the ongoing friction in exactly how infrastructure development is being prioritized and funded across different levels of government.
And this brilliantly illustrates why private sector innovation is so aggressive right now. As Krish Bhuman, the CEO of Roxas, points out, without hands-free operations, autonomy stops at the depot. With the physical grid stretched to its absolute limits and policy funding navigating some pretty complex roadblocks, companies just have to squeeze every single ounce of efficiency they can out of their existing local infrastructure. If you can't easily get a new transformer, well, your charging depot needs to run with absolute robotic perfection just to survive the crunch.
Which leaves us with this final, provocative thought to ponder. We clearly have the technology to electrify our future, from rolling robotaxis to autonomous robotic charging arms. But the real question is, do we have the patience, the capital, and the manufacturing stamina to completely rebuild the invisible grid that makes the whole shebang possible? Next time you see an EV plug-in, take a second to think about the incredible chain reaction actually powering it. Thanks for exploring this with us today.